Hey fam, welcome back to the City Rev podcast. My name is Mandy. With me I have Pastor Justin. Each week we feature conversations on what it means to live like Christ in a modern culture, to navigate relationships and friendships, and how to equip you to make a difference in your cities.
That's right. That's what we do.
We do that. Before
you said do.
We do. I did say do.
Sorry. Okay. Go ahead.
What I was going to say is before we get started on today's topic, we want to remind you to please subscribe to our channel. This allows every new City Rev Life podcast episode to download directly to your phone, and you're ready to hit play. So, shall we get started?
Let's do it.
Let's talk about it. Today's topic. You ready for this one?
I've been preparing for this for weeks now.
You look ready. You physically look ready for this. Today's topic is going to be on dun 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 technology.
Technology. That's right. We're super pumped about it.
Yes. Technology. This was paused for dramatic effect. This is very serious.
A moment of silence on your podcast.
But we're just really pumped. Justin and I are really pumped because we, on and off screen, we've been talking about technology. We've been talking about the way that it plays a role in our lives, just wise strategies to put in place when we're talking about technology. Mm-hmm. And the question of the hour, Justin, really is technology good or is it bad? Is it a binary, right? So we're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be giving you resources if you want to manage technology in your life, and just be wise about its relationship, right?
Yep.
So here's a fun opener, Justin.
Let's do it.
We're going to take it back to early 2000s with this one, since we were around in the MySpace era.
We were in the MySpace era.
Do you remember that when you got in a relationship, you can put a relationship status?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So here's the question I have for you.
Uh-huh.
With technology, what would you say is your relationship status with technology? Is it single, engaged? Single meaning like I don't use it at all, right?
Right.
Engaged.
As I sit here with my MacBook.
Right.
Doing a podcast.
On a podcast.
Right.
Engaged, which I guess would be that you sometimes, this is a bad analogy. Anyways, we'll just dive into it. Single, engaged, married, or it's complicated.
I am a mix between married and it's complicated.
Ooh, interesting.
Yes, I'm a mix between married and it's complicated. I think married because there's a sense in which we are married to technology. The fact that we're doing this podcast, I think, is evidence of that. It's the world that we live in. But at the same time, it's complicated. There are times where I just loathe technology. I just can't stand it. And I think for our purposes today, by technology, I mean, technically, like, the wheel is technology. You know, we're not talking about that. We're primarily focused in on the recent innovations of the information age we find ourselves in. We're talking about, screens, laptops, computers, televisions, and phones, largely phones. Yes.
It's going to be largely phones. So Justin, recently you and I have been talking about a very historical moment in history.
Yes.
Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little about that?
Yeah. So all throughout history textbooks, you have all these dates that appear, and they're important for various reasons. You got 1776, it's a very significant date. All these dates in our history. I think decades from now, September of 2007 is going to be one of those moments in time that's going to be marked in history in our textbooks. That's when the first iPhone came out, September 12, 2007. And I remember, I don't know if you remember, I remember my first time holding and using an iPhone. I was just amazed, okay? I had my own Nokia, brick phone in my a small brick, okay?
The flip phones?
Not the huge bricks, but I had my Nokia in my pocket, handling my friend's iPhone, and just being amazed you could watch YouTube videos on a cell phone. I thought it was the craziest thing. I just couldn't, I had no categories for it. Yeah. And it was this incredible experience. But that moment in our history set us up for a world that we now live in that's very normal now to us. Yeah. And it's what our kids are growing up in. This generation has grown up in. And we really are just now as a society starting to come to grips with the good and the bad that comes along with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. You know what's crazy to think about is, are we the last generation to we're the last generation to know what the world would be like before.
Yeah, millennials
yeah.
are the generation that really, in their formative years of like high school, college, in that zone, post college, that's where millennials first interacted with the iPhone. And so growing up, we had, AOL, Instant Messenger, and all those kinds of things. But the phone, access to the internet in your pocket, iPhone experience is something that was a huge change for my life. It just changed the way that I relate to the internet in a number of ways.
Yeah. So our question when we started off was, is technology good or bad? We know because of September 2007 that the world has never been the same.
Yep, that's right.
What would we say are some benefits of technology and how it's shaped our world and changed our world? And also with that, we know that it comes with some cautions.
Yes.
So what would be some benefits of technology?
Yeah, I think to set that up, the best way I can think of describing technology is it's kind of like fire. So fire, if you think about it, is used for so many incredible things. So, we're in South Florida here, but maybe some of you guys have a chimney in your home and a fireplace. But, fire to warm up a home in wintertime, like let's pretend like maybe it's the 2 days of year in South Florida where it's cold. But fire can be used to cook things. Fire can be used to cauterize, like to help where there's wounds that need to be healed. Fire can be used to provide light in darkness. So fire has so many incredible purposes that are good. All of what, I love to cook barbecue. Barbecue relies on fire. Okay. So fire is a beautiful thing. The problem though with fire is what happens if the fire gets out of its confined, chimney. Like fire in your chimney in your fireplace is wonderful. It'll roast some marshmallows over it, enjoy time with the family, roasting chestnuts on an open fire. Okay. But if that makes its way into your living room and outside of the confines of your fireplace, it brings destruction. And so what I would say with technology is, given its proper uses, it can be used as a tool for tremendous good, but then it has also some dangers with it. And that's what we're talking about. So let's talk benefits, a couple of benefits. And I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on this too, Mandy. But just the fact that we have the internet in our pockets, one very simple thing is the fact that we have a Bible in our pockets constantly. Think about what a tremendous blessing that is for our days. Like imagine if you just had to walk around with a Bible, whereas we now have in our phones, whether it's the YouVersion app or whatever app it is, access to God's word constantly in multiple languages and in multiple translations within those languages. Yeah. That's a huge blessing. And
it's read to you.
It can even read to you, right? We have no excuse. We have so much just the fact that we have a GPS in our phones constantly. I think of FaceTime, like how revolutionary that was to be able to, if you use Skype or Zoom, the ability to connect with someone across the world and see their face and communicate, that video chat. I think of times where I've been either traveling for work or, on vacation and away from my kids, and the ability to just FaceTime them is huge. And then think about what we've been doing as a church. We've been doing this for years now, but really accelerating it is being able to do church anywhere because of the internet, and largely because people have access to the internet on their phones. So it's changed everything.
That's so good. I'm also thinking the way that it's changed. I was recently having this conversation with a friend. We're saying it's changed how we live our everyday life. Yeah. An example of this would be like if you're wanting to check out a new restaurant.
What's the first thing you do?
You don't usually call them and have them read off the menu or the specials for the day.
Sure.
You look it up in the computer in your pocket, right?
Yeah.
For traveling, you want to check out a new destination. I don't know what you do, Justin, but
TripAdvisor.
That's so mature. I go to Instagram and I look up the place and I see all the Insta pics, and I'm like, oh, that's such a beautiful backdrop for my, profile picture.
There you go.
And so that's how we travel. It's changed the way that we date. There's a lot of online dating now, whereas before it would be face to face.
We have mutual good friends that we know.
Yes.
Met on Match. Are incredible, amazing people. They have a beautiful baby, you know, like what a blessing.
Yeah, super cool. And it's changed friendships.
Yeah.
You know, I've made friends with people over the internet,
Yes.
you know, that have become my real life friends.
Yeah.
So needless to say, you know, technology has so many benefits, you know, that we just went over, and it's changed our life
Yeah.
in so many positive ways. With technology, we know that it can be, like we said, it's a tool. So this can be used for our good, and this can be used for our bad, really.
Yeah.
And so what would you say is some of the, I don't want to say cons of technology, but maybe
Yeah.
some cautions that we
Yeah.
should be on alert with when using technology?
Sure. So, you know, like we mentioned, so when Steve Jobs announced this 2007, this is going to change the world. It sure has changed the world. And we really are starting to catch on to, you know, I think the world just kind of consumed it and said, yes, I'm all in. Give me the iPhone, give me the Android. You know, I want all of this. And we're just starting to catch up to some of what the cautions are, and we're starting to learn them. There, in the area of research, especially among young people, but even among adults, there is just a lot of content in terms of research and what universities are looking into. A lot of peer-reviewed content is around this idea of the effect of screen time and its correlation with things like anxiety, its correlation with things like depression. There is so much right now that's being researched and conclusions that are being drawn, and there's some really strong scientific evidence that there is a correlation between the amount of time we spend on these technologies sucked into our screens, and there's some measure of predictability with how likely we are to have anxiety, depression.
That's so true. Yeah.
And so there's some of that we have to have on our radar. The other thing that it's doing is since 2007, our attention span as human beings has been plummeting. There's very famous statistic, I don't know if you've heard it, that humans now have on average less of an attention span than goldfish, which is kind of a crazy thing. If you don't believe me, Google it, okay? You'll find it on the internet. It has to be true, right?
Use your technology to Google.
That's right.
About our attention span.
Exactly. So we're trying to get your attention off of our content because you clearly don't. No, I'm just kidding. So our attention span is also being affected. Just think about the way our brains work now. We're constantly sucking in information. Yeah. We hate quiet space. I think that's another caution is if we find ourselves uncomfortable in silence, and if we find ourselves like feeling awkward and not being able to enter into any sort of contemplative space, think about all of the creativity that you lose. Think about all of the time to think about the things in life that really matter most, because we're just cramming information into our brains.
Yeah.
We suck all the space out for that kind of thing. Suck out all the space for prayer, for time to meditate on scripture. Another thing that I would say as far as a caution goes is there's just an addictive nature to technology.
Yeah, for sure.
It becomes an addiction. I think I would say I have addictive tendencies with technology. Like, I'll give you an example. I'm walking down a hallway, maybe leaving my office, and on my way to either go to someone else's office or whatever, and I'll just naturally and instinctively pull out my phone and just start flipping through something. Just like without thinking. It's just ingrained in my behavior to have that tendency. And those types of things like cue us. I don't know what's your version of that? Do you have like a version of, it's like if I get in my car or whatever?
Oh yeah, for sure. I get in my car and that's the first thing that I reach for.
Yes.
Because I love podcasts. I'm an avid podcast listener, which is
me too.
Is good.
We like
right?
podcasts around here.
We do. I mean, it's all right. We're kind of biased about podcasts.
Right.
But that's the first thing that I reach for. When I'm at a stoplight, I reach for my phone.
Who wants to sit for 2 whole minutes?
Yeah, or in the line, waiting for something. And to your point, Justin,
Right.
It's not creating margin in our life to be able to have these normal interactions, human interactions that would have happened, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great point. And, also to your point with it becoming, an addictive behavior, and also with the correlation between our screen time and depression and anxiety amongst many people, is social media as well. This is just a good thing for us to mention is like we can create with all these different social media platforms, we can create our own identity.
Yep.
And what we want to be perceived as. We can create our own perceptions.
That's right.
Which kind of feeds into the depression, feeds into the anxiety, because we're trying to live up to a false sense of self, you know, through our social platforms.
Yes.
And so, you know, it's another thing too. It I think feeds discontentment, or it can feed discontentment into our lives. You know, looking through what is so-and-so doing with their summer, where are they traveling, what outfit are they wearing,
right?
Like, what's on trend? Is that something that I have?
Right.
Does that take away from my value? Am I being seen? Am I being talked about, cared about through the internet? And that has, I see the way that takes a toll, you know, honestly, in my life. And I know that I'm not the only one, you know? And so these are real things to consider, you know, and as we've been talking through, like, we need to consider with technology what the fruit of it is in our lives. Yep. And so I know that we have, you know, a couple questions that we can kind of go through to help us to navigate our honest connection and relationship to technology in our lives.
Yes. So to set up the questions, one of my favorite passages of scripture, I love the book of Ephesians, and in Ephesians 5, the Apostle Paul, he instructs us and commissions us. He says this in verses 15 and 16. He says, "Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil." And that word there is redeeming the time. Making the best use of the time is a redemption word. He's saying, redeem your time, because the days we live in are evil days. Yeah. In other words, he says, examine your life. Like, look at your life. Look at your life carefully, because there's a current, there's a flow that our world is operating in. And that flow is away from God. That flow is away from contentment. That flow is away from love, joy, peace, patience, right? That flow is towards discontentment and status and all those things we've been talking about. Yeah. And so that commission to look carefully at our lives, what these three questions are going to do is just help us to look carefully when it comes to technology and evaluate our engagement with it. So let's hit the first one. The first one I wrote down is just asking the question to start: how much time do I want to spend on screens every day? Like, what a novel idea to just start with that question. Like, as I was preparing for this podcast and thinking through that, you know, I think of that with my money, right? So Amy and I, we budget, we think through our budget, what our expenditures are going to be like. And, you know, I know many listeners or people watching, like, that's not a crazy idea. It's not a new idea. But some, maybe what you do is you just kind of have a mental tally of what you've got in the bank or what you can spend. But there's this sense of budgeting with money. We don't do that with our time, and especially with technology. So starting with the question, how much time do I want to spend on screens every day? In fact, I think that'd be good. Like, after this podcast, just answer that question for yourself. Yeah. Like, what's your answer right now if you just had to give me a number? Well, how much time would you want to spend on screens every day?
Well,
not including work.
For my job.
Not including work. Not including work.
Oh my gosh. I would say an hour.
An hour. Okay.
Max.
An hour. That's how much you would want.
Friends. Yeah.
Okay. So that includes your phone, and that includes TV, and that includes any Amazon shopping.
Oh, okay. Wait, hold on. You said Amazon.
We'll give you time after the podcast, but
you can't put me on the spot, man. I need to do a budget here for my time.
That's right. Yeah. So here's why I say that is none of us start with that question. Let's be real. We don't start with that question. And the reason why I think it's important that we do start thinking about our technology engagement with that question first is because every piece of tech that we engage with, whether it's an online platform or a device, it is literally designed by people that are smarter than us to monopolize our time, right? That's how they make their money. Yeah. By getting us on their platforms. They make money on our attention. So they're thinking with that in mind. How can we get more and more of their time? And so if we don't decide for ourselves how much time do I want to spend on screens, what we're instead saying is, I'm going to let an algorithm that somebody in Silicon Valley crafted dictate how much of my life I spend on a screen. And I'm going to say, hey, person I've never met in Silicon Valley who created this algorithm, I trust you with my time.
Yeah.
And our lives essentially are the sum total of what we do with our time. Our lives are the sum total of how we spend our time. And so the danger, I want to like introduce this idea, the danger of the drip is we don't think it's that big of a deal because it's only in 2 minute increments or 5 minute increments. It's a 10-minute scroll session on Instagram. It's a 15-minute TikTok session, right?
Yeah.
It's one Netflix show that sets the timer that in 5 seconds another show is going to play if you don't click exit quick enough, and so it turns into a second show.
Anxiety's real.
You get in the cycle. So
yeah.
I think starting with that question, how much time do I want to spend on the front end, is a helpful place to start.
Yeah, that's good. I've heard it said with managing the drip, as you call it,
right?
It's like every single thing, even if it's just a minute or 5 minutes on technology in some kind of way, our subconscious is picking up on the messages that are being told to us through these technologies.
Yeah.
And so going back, to what we're saying about anxiety and depression as well, is like all these things that are being fed into our subconscious. If we're feeling down or anxious later that day, it would be very useful for us to maybe examine that the things that we're scrolling through are being picked up by our minds.
Right.
And that's informing our feelings and reactions inwardly towards that. So.
That's right. Earlier you articulated all these questions like, am I seen? Is my life mattering? Those are all those are questions that pop up deep in our soul and in the back of our mind. They aren't literally what we say.
Right. Yeah.
But that is articulating that messaging that we're subtly, picking up on in those 1 minute drips. That's good.
That's really, really good. So what is the third question? I think we did the second question.
No, we're on question 2.
Oh, I'm
You're jumping ahead. That's okay. The second one will be pretty quick. So first question was, how much time do I want to spend? Start with that and then adjust your technology appropriately.
Yeah.
Second question is, how is the technology that I'm using adding value to my life? So this question is designed to help you evaluate the different forms of technology you're using, the different platforms you're using, whether it's social media, whether it's a subscription, whatever it is. How is this adding value to my life? And I think we can both think of technologies that we use that add value to our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Mandy, what's one thing in technology that adds value to Mandy's life?
Oh man, I love recipes, especially now fall.
Awesome.
We're foodies, Justin.
That's right.
Everybody should know, Justin and I just love food. When we thought about examples for this, we both just said food.
Independently came together with food.
Yes. Food. So I love Instagram. I'm a big Instagrammer. I love social platforms for many good reasons. One of them is just getting information like recipes. I love that. I watch all the food videos. Those are things that take up definitely a lot more time in my life than I'd like to admit.
Sure.
And like how to make things.
But you're a better cook for it, I bet.
That's true. It's so enriching to my life and others around me.
Yeah.
And I love the connections that you can make with people, strangers all around the world. I love looking at, artists that I love. I get encouraged by them. We connect on the internet, collaborations that are made, So that's just an example of a way that I feel like technology is enriching my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
One thing that comes to mind is I joined a Facebook group of people who use the same type of barbecue smoker that I have. It makes me sound super nerdy, I know. So nerdy.
It's like another level.
But it's been super helpful. And Jeremy, our camera guy who's here with us when we do podcasts, shout out to Jeremy.
Like you need to have tall socks.
He's the one who let me onto this. Like, dude, you got to search for your grill. You got to search for it. And you learn so much. People who have the same thing that you have, and you're like, hey, I keep running into this problem. And then you go on the group and somebody has said the same problem and somebody else brings you the answer. It's amazing. I love it. So
everybody should know that Jeremy's in this room and he's wincing right now.
Yes, it's beautiful. We love you, Jeremy.
So good.
But I think about all the ways, there are ways, those are 2 small examples. Technology adds value to our lives in a number of ways.
Yeah.
We're not taking away from that. So I think a couple of ways it does that is, you mentioned connections. There are ways we can connect, especially digitally, that technology has afforded us. That is so huge and enriching. There are ways that we can learn on technology. I think about the way that technology has empowered people to learn and create businesses, create companies, create jobs, bring dignity and purpose to people's life, because they have at their fingertips, if you have access to the internet, you have access to learning information that then empowers you to start something, to bring solutions to the world's problems. I mean, there are so many ways that technology can add value to our life, but there are ways that we can sense where, whoa, this is not adding value to my life. And the question I think we need to wrestle with is, if this technology is not adding value to my life, it's taking value from my life, why am I on it? And why am I saying, let me just get sucked into this? And so if it's fueling anxiety, if technology is fueling anxiety, if it's disconnecting me from my community, right? If it's actually making me feel lonelier, then ask myself the question, like, why am I engaging with this in this way? And it might be a hint. You're addicted. And that's why you're engaging with it that way. There's an addiction, a dependence that's built. And the very definition of an addiction is it's not helpful, but you can't control it. Yeah. And so there's that starting point of defining, okay, this is actually not adding value to my life. It's making my life worse. I feel anxious. I'm feeling lonely. I'm feeling depressed. I feel disconnected. This is taking my attention away from the people in my life right in front of me, because I am so sucked into my phone or my, I think there's a parent listening right now that is like, I need to tell that to my teen, right? And and parents, we do this too, right? We're in on this too. It's not just young kids that deal with this. Adults, on end. I think of some of the worst culprits of this. All right, get ready for this. Grandparents on Facebook. I mean, I have an aunt that I love. I have an aunt that I love. She's amazing. And she lives far away from here, and it's awesome that we get to connect. But she is the most Facebook fierce person I know. I mean, if I post something on Facebook, within seconds, she has commented, liked, and asked me a question about it, which is
so
fine.
good though. It makes us feel so good. Right. We're like, oh, what I said was valuable.
Thank you. Yeah, right. So I think this is for all of us. It's not just one generation. It's all generations. We all have to come to terms with it. So just asking the question, how is this adding value to my life? And if it's not adding value to my life, what needs to change? Yes. Or maybe I just need to walk away from this for a season or entirely.
Yeah, that's really good. I don't know. I was going to mention it in the next one. We're talking about, 7 ideas, strategies, but maybe that means that we need to take a type of break from it.
Yep.
That's really good.
Let's hit the third one just quickly. This one will be very short. Is just, what's the agenda of this technology and how am I being influenced? What is the agenda of this technology and how am I being influenced? Here's why that's important. We typically have our antennas up and are thinking critically when someone that we disagree with is speaking, right? If we have a particular view on something and we know that someone is speaking that we disagree with, we typically have our antennas up and we're thinking, all right, what's this person saying? What's their agenda, right? We typically have our antennas down if it's either A, entertainment, or B, if it's someone that we're assuming we do agree with. And what I would say is there is a healthy practice of keeping antennas up at all times. Now, by that, I don't mean like you're approaching every conversation like a critic. That's not what we're talking about. But I am talking about when it comes to our engagement with technology, realizing everything has an agenda. TikTok, Facebook, Snapchat, Apple, Microsoft, all of these platforms, Google, they all have an agenda, right? And they all have a business model, right? Yeah. They're making money in terms of these social media platforms off of our attention. And so it's important for us to know and understand that. So that way, when we're using these technologies, we at least have in our minds what their strategies are and what they're trying to do, to monopolize our time. So I think of I don't know if you're a Disney Plus person or a Netflix person or a both person.
I am.
We are a both person in our household. We have Netflix and Disney Plus. When it comes to those streaming platforms, I think it's important for us to know and realize, okay, how are they, what's their business model? Do they have an agenda? Are they trying to influence me? Asking all those questions and at least having somewhat of a culturally discerning filter on the content that I'm taking in.
Yeah.
You're smiling really big.
I am, and it's because I'm remembering your wife Amy.
Yes.
Texted me.
She texted you?
She texted me. I'm trying not to laugh through this, and I think her and I were like sharing just different shows that would be great for us to watch, and she had asked me like, "Hey, did you watch this show on Disney Plus? I know it's for like little children, but
I know the show you're talking about.
You do,
because I watched it too.
I was like, I love that show. I
know.
binged watched that show, and it's really for teens.
Yes,
but we really enjoyed it. So.
You know, I was just trying to stay hip and get current on what the young generation is. That was research.
Sure.
Totally.
Sure.
But I think asking those questions of knowing that helps. You know, that helps us when we do engage. We kind of know what we've signed up for.
Yeah.
So.
That's really good. So before this, you and I were also just talking about, sharing some strategies for managing our time on tech.
Yeah.
And so we came up with a couple fun ones as
That's right.
well. So why don't you go ahead and lead us into a couple strategies that could help us?
Yes. Yeah, we'll list these off. So the first one, and I think this is the easiest one that if you haven't done this already, like as soon as this podcast ends, I think you should do it. The first one is to adjust your notifications. And what I mean by that is you set the tone for what you want Facebook, for what you want Twitter, for what you want Instagram, for what you want all of your apps. Set the tone for what you want them to inform you about. Because if you just kind of just give them your access to your attention, they will win that battle every time. Yeah. So just adjusting your notification. One thing I did that was revolutionary for me was I turned off notifications on Instagram for when I get a like or a comment.
Oh, yeah.
And why I did that is because I found myself like, this would have been, I did this several years ago, but I found myself constantly getting those notifications and being like, ooh, let me check how many I've got now. Oh, now how many? And it played these tricks with my mind that I just wanted no part of. So changing that to where now I don't get those notifications unless I literally open the app.
Yeah.
So you figure out what notifications you want. I think that plays into the question of how much time you want to spend on technology.
Yeah. There's another one too that I don't have this, but I've heard other people do this, is when they get home, they actually have like a family phone spot.
Yes.
Where they get in, they put their phone in a basket, and then they go about their business.
Some people put it in a lockbox, depends on.
I have heard of the lockbox.
Yes.
Actually, in the documentary we saw, they did have a lockbox.
That's
for
right.
the phone.
That's right.
And this, even if it's like you're listening to this, you're like, okay, well, that's a little extreme. I'm not going to put my phone away. There's also, I guess, like milder versions of this where you're having family dinner, or you're just spending intentional time with your loved one. You put it away, so that's not interrupted time.
That's
so
right.
it's just another really good strategy.
Yeah, having a phone spot when you get home from work, for those of you who work, or even many of us, we use our phones for our work. And there are some of us who maybe run businesses, and because of that, you need to be accessible. At the same time, we need to kind of set the tone for when we're going to be present with the people that we love. When we're going to be present for dinner, when we're going to be present for, spending time with friends, when are we going to be present with our families? And so having that phone spot. Another thing that's been huge for me is having something of a night and morning routine that includes what I do with my phone. So at night, I plug my phone into my charger, and I make it my goal to not touch my phone until the next morning after I've spent time in scripture. So I had been in this routine where my phone was my alarm clock and it was next to me, and it slept, like my phone slept next to me. There were some days where I would sleep literally with my phone on my pillow with me.
Oh, I've done that, yeah.
It's almost like I'm snuggling with my phone, right? And I adjusted that so now that in the mornings, my phone stays plugged in the charger most days, okay? I must confess. Most days it stays plugged in until after I've spent time in scripture, spent time in that. And if you use your phone for your scripture engagement and that works for you, but by all means, like leverage that. I use my laptop sometimes for my scripture reading, to journal as well. And so the important thing is that you just don't start and end your day with your phone.
Yeah.
Like if you start and end your day with Instagram, or you start and end your day with Facebook or TikTok, that then starts to like sandwich your life. and think about what that
it creates
does.
a rhythm and an intention for your day.
Yes.
I think another really good one, if you're listening and you're like, well, I really want to be intentional about the amount of screen time that I have, and maybe a phone fast, a tech fast would be something that would be beneficial for you.
Yeah.
And I one time heard it said that this woman that I follow on Instagram, she says a healthy rhythm for her is that she takes it's called a 1-1-1 social rest strategy, which means that she takes 1 day a week off of her phone, off of social media, or she'll do 1 week a month, and she'll do 1 month a year.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe some people are like crawling out of their skin listening to me say that because it's your life. But if that's something that you want to be serious about, and we spoke about creating margin in our life to be able to feed our inner lives, our inner selves, and our private life affects our public life.
Yeah.
And so that time creating space for a fast could help you to enrich your private life that then informs your public life. So.
Yes. I think one thing, if you're hearing this and you're like, this is overwhelming, this is too much, this is a lot. Honestly, doing a fast of sorts, a digital like disengagement for a stretch of time, whether it's for a 24-hour period, 1 week, and doing that with someone, what that's going to show you is also where you're at. Because you're going to see how often you're going to just go for it.
Yeah.
Or how much of a temptation it is. And,
maybe it does bring up anxiety for you.
Yeah. And I think it's important to kind of come to terms with that and see where that is so that we can find healing from it. And then the other thing that are just really simple, like the screen time apps that are available on our phones, just to look at how much time we spend on it. That can be a sad exercise, but just facing and owning, wow, I spent 6 hours a day on my phone or whatever it is, being able to see that and then measuring that with, okay, how am I doing with what I said my goal was? And then setting a time in your day to answer emails or check news feeds or to check your social media, like setting up that rhythm. Maybe it's, I'm going to read the news at lunchtime, or maybe I'm going to check my Instagram or Facebook, whatever social media, I'm going to check that at this time of day. And that way I can stay current. I can comment on who I want to comment with. I can interact and engage in that way. But that could be a strategy you employ so that you're not all day, 2 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 10 minutes here, 30 minutes here, that drip. You avoid that drip by saying, oh, I check my platforms at this time.
You have a time.
Yeah.
So you can wait.
So I'll check it later. That's a strategy that I've employed at times that might be helpful to you.
Yeah.
And then because I'm competitive, the last strategy that I would say is find someone to compete with. Set a goal. I want to spend this much on my screen. And then you hold each other accountable. And whoever meets their goal has to buy dinner or whoever doesn't meet their goal or does worse has to buy the other dinner.
Okay, we should do one, Justin.
We should do one.
And whoever's the loser,
yes,
which will be you, has to bring in some really good barbecue.
Wait, but then what if I win? Then you're going to cook barbecue.
That's why.
And bring it into the office.
That's why I said that, is because I'm not going to lose.
All right. We'll talk about that after the show. Anyway.
This is my bitterness coming out because I've asked Justin to please make me barbecue for a very long time.
That's
and
true.
Now it's a public conversation that we're having. So
the pressure.
You're held accountable. All right. So as we go through these are really, really good strategies. Did you want to add one more thing, Justin?
Yeah. So I would just say to wrap this up, there are some recommended resources that I would give just as we're kind of bringing this conversation to a close. Mandy and I both, we have seen The Social Dilemma. That's kind of like taken the world by storm. I can't recommend it enough. It's funny, we're talking about technology and we're encouraging you to go to technology to talk about
the irony of
the
it
ways. But seriously, one of the ways that technology is a blessing is the access to this content. So there's a documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma. Watch it. You'll thank us later, okay? Very good stuff, Social Dilemma. 2 books, Tech-Wise Family by Andy Crouch. We'll put it in the show notes. Make sure it's there. Tech-Wise Family by Andy Crouch. And then 12 Ways Your Phone is Changing You by Tony Reinke. Both those books, they're different in their approach, talking through a very similar topic. But those are super helpful if you want to do a deeper dive.
Yeah, so good. Most of my stuff has been through podcasts, but I'm glad that you've read these books for us. I can recommend it.
Yeah.
I just have a lot of podcasts to recommend. But Justin, thanks so much for coming on and just sharing a couple of these strategies. We hope that this has been helpful for you. And hey, if you can think of a friend or family that this could be helpful for, go ahead and share it. We love you, City Rev fam, and we hope to see you soon. Bye.
Thank you for joining us on City Rev Life. You can subscribe to this podcast, rate and review wherever you're listening to this. And we love it when you share it with your friends on social media. For more videos and content, go ahead and check us out at cityrev.org/podcast or download our City Rev Church app. Have a great day.